All right. Hi, everybody. Back with another video interview with a parent for you. This week, we're talking about, as you know, partnerships with families that we're working with and whose children we're caring for. And again, I just thought it would be really important to hear a parent's voice in this conversation and not just our own voices or the voice of our textbook. So welcome. Amanda Mays is here. And she is a childcare consumer. She has two children. And have they both been in childcare?
Yes, both have.
Childcare? Okay, great. So thank you for joining us. I want to start by just asking, is there, what do you want to share about your experience as a parent using childcare seeking partnership?
I've used a lot of different types of childcare, so I thought that might be useful to talk about. My oldest is currently 10. When I had him, I was a graduate student and working full-time. So he started out in individual care with a former coworker of mine. So that was kind of like peak partnership for me in terms of working with a childcare provider because I was really comfortable with her. We had worked together. She was a K-12 educator, so I knew she had a lot of training on how to best work with kids. And that's how he started. When she ended up finding another position, then he went into a church childcare, which is probably the least amount of partnership I've had with a childcare organization. They actually lost Graham at one point and didn't find him for an hour or so. So I'd say there was not much trust in that partnership at all.
Yeah.
I think their staff in general was undertrained and underpaid for what they were doing. And there was a lot of turnover in staff. Mm-hmm. I believe in 1 year, he had 4 different lead classroom teachers. So it was just really hard to establish any sort of ongoing relationship with that much turnover. Mm-hmm. He ended up in a better situation eventually, thankfully. And then with my youngest, she's been at one center. Lainey is 3. She's been at one center the entire time. I would say I would put it in middle of the road in terms of partnership. They also deal with a high amount of staff turnover, which is problematic. We've had a couple of different center directors now. Now with COVID, there's even the bigger challenge that makes it harder to communicate with her teachers because I largely don't see them. I haven't even met one of the two since she's gone back to care. I would say in general, I have a fairly high level of trust with this center and they seem really accountable and do as much of a good job, I think, as possible. And sometimes trying to communicate like daily through an app. I really appreciate having an app and getting updates on what she's doing throughout the day. But COVID has definitely created some issues with parent and family communication.
Yeah. And you mentioned a lot of things in there that I think need to be taken into consideration when we're trying to figure out how to establish good partnerships. And a lot of times, and I'm speaking more to the students, but you can react to this if you have a reaction when I'm done. But a lot of times when we in the field talk about partnerships with parents, what we mean is we want parents to do what we ask them. We want parents to bring the things and do the things and do the discipline at home if we're having a problem here. And that's how we see partnership. And we have to really stretch ourselves to see that partnership means that both it's equality and it's, but you talked about comfort and you talked about trust. And so as a parent, I guess I'm going to go backwards, but so you talked about that you really felt like you knew Graham's first provider, and that was a source of trust for you and comfort, and that you knew her background, and that she had some knowledge about what you were asking her to do. Are there other sort of characteristics about a provider that makes it easier to feel like you're in partnership, or actions that they take that either feed it or starve it?
I think communication is probably one of the biggest ones with the larger centers. I don't think there's really such a thing as over communication as to what's going on in the room. Mm-hmm. I know at times when I've kind of had rubs with Lainey's child care center, it's almost always largely due to lack of information or lack of communication, or that the worst out of the grouping is ignoring what parents have to say. about particular issues. One thing specifically, I know that I've kind of butted heads with the current center director is how we celebrate or not celebrate holidays and which types of occasions. And just I have a fairly liberal bias that I don't think it's okay to teach children about one religious or holiday tradition, that they need to learn about a variety of things. And I feel like parents who have challenged the school's position on that have kind of been viewed as problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues that I've experienced from the childcare side of it, early childhood side of it, is that parent requests are so often become fodder for break room jokes or staff meeting griping, instead of, well, what can we do with this perspective? If we're really interested in partnership, why are they having this concern? What is it they would like to see happen differently? How could we work together? Instead of, well, she's just a problem, or we just drop one parent's name and everybody would be like, and that's not productive or conducive to really strong partnerships when we're sharing the care of a young child. You talked about communication, and you talked about picking up at the end of the day. One of the things, just because of how our system is set up, that happens is when you go to pick up at the end of the day, you don't see the teacher, you see that afternoon person who comes in. So what ideas do you have for, you mentioned an app that her regular teacher can keep in contact with you, but do you have ideas for ways to navigate that situation where you're not going to be able to have the conversation at the end of the day with the person who is with her for most of the day?
Yeah, and I don't have it set up quite the way I would like currently, because Lainey just switched rooms, moved up to a room, and that's why I haven't met one of the two at all, because we don't interact with the teachers for the most part in any way, shape, or form in person right now, which I understand that there are regulations.
Oh, right, because you're dropping her off at the curb and taking her back. Yeah.
In the past, I've actually been friends with Lainey's teachers on Facebook and had their contact information and just communicated with them directly. And I always thought that worked well. I was a teacher myself at the K-12 level, and found a lot of times if I went around whatever administrative red tape was set up to try to prevent parents from talking to teachers, that it worked better just to talk to each other as human beings. Yeah. So with Lainey's classroom teacher this entire past academic year, like, she would drop me an email probably at least once a week. She'd message me on Facebook if Lainey did something like particularly silly that day, or it's like really great with one of her friends. Same if she was a turd, she would do those kind of things to me too. And so I felt like that was probably the best that I've had in terms of communication. Yeah. Now, I don't think the center currently likes that that's happening, that some parents and teachers want to communicate outside of the app that we're supposed to be communicating in, but I've found it to be really helpful.
Yeah, Facebook is an important part of this conversation, I think, because we talk about connection and we talk about relationship building being important, partnership, but then there's all these levels of gatekeeping that are set up to keep parents and teachers from really having the kinds of conversations that develop relationship. And I'm a huge fan of being Facebook friends with parents of kids I care for. And I do feel like I have a better connection with them because there's been some conversation that's not just business. And there's a little bit of a social barrier that you can get through pretty quickly on Facebook when you're not able to do that day-to-day, face-to-face. But it requires, of course, some professional ethic. Anytime you, and this is again is more to the students than to you, Amanda, but obviously you're not going to share information that's confidential with a parent just because you're on your Facebook friends, or treat the child differently than you would. So I'm just sort of saying that for the sake of saying it so I don't get in trouble. But I do think that social media can be a really good tool if we use it responsibly.
Yeah, and I think it really helped to humanize both of us to each other. So like if she sees that something different is going on in my house, like that gives her an understanding that, okay, well, that might be why I'm seeing these types of behaviors or reactions from Lainey. And
Absolutely.
then vice versa, when I've seen like that she's having a hard time personally, like that helps me to feel more connected to her. So with Lainey's last teacher, for example, went through some pretty traumatic relationship changes and shared about that on Facebook. If she was Lainey's teacher at any age level, I would be fine with her sharing all of those kinds of things with
Yeah,
Lainey. Like, it's important for kids to see their teachers as real human beings. I
absolutely.
think it's important for parents to see that and vice versa. So I've helped her with things when she needs them. And that's like, none of that would have come about if we weren't first friends on social media and got past like that initial awkwardness.
Yeah, and humanity keeps coming up in these interviews that I'm doing with parents and families, and I think that's one of the gatekeeping tools that's sort of subconscious for a lot of us, but we feel like I'm the teacher and you're the parent, and there's this power dynamic and an imbalance. And so it's really hard to invite someone into partnership when we're also sort of asserting our power over you and our authority over you. So that's another thing to think about. And I do think that that's sort of one of the ways social media has a leveling effect, is to just bring it all back to humanity. Looking at my notes, sorry, see if I had anything else I wanted to ask you about, but do you have stories or examples of things that have really been effective, or really, other than Facebook we just talked about, but are there other things that really made you feel like this teacher really wants this partnership, that it's not just lip service, it's...
I'm getting to watch how certain teachers have interacted with both of my kids. So both in photography form, if it's going through an app, getting to see it in person, and watching too, like Lainey's reaction to different people who have cared for her. So I would say with the teacher that I've mentioned that were Facebook friends, I know for a fact Lainey absolutely adores her because she wants to give her a hug every day before they leave. She tells me on the weekends, oh, I miss seeing her. I can't wait to go back to school. And that really seems to be genuinely mutual. And I understand that you're not going to love every kid that you're teaching. That was certainly true for me as a teacher. Some I really had to fake it till I make it in terms of like caring for them. But I think especially when you see it from your child and know that that relationship is genuine, that's probably like the peak for me. And I've also, had Lainey with teachers that I believe that they were good teachers, but they didn't necessarily have that strong of a bond with her. And so that's just like, that's kind of like the extra.
Yeah, I've worked with lots of people who say, I got into this to work with kids, not to deal with their parents, but it's inseparable. And so like our Paths to Quality, which is our quality rating system in Indiana, and accreditation systems like NACE, both to prove that you have parent partnership and involvement, all you have to do is like document that you have a newsletter, or that you have conferences, or the app that shares things every day. And that's so basic. Like we need to go further above that. And with your teaching background, that.
Yeah. And then one of the other things that I probably wish was going on more, which COVID, it's now not a thing, is having parents in the classroom. Yeah. So that's one of the places where I've kind of feel that barrier as a parent. So my background is in art education. I have over a decade of teaching experience, not as much in early childhood, but a lot of it can be modified. And I always mention every year, like I can come up with whatever kinds of things you would like to do with the kids. If you just like to have somebody else in the room doing a different type of activity with them, or exposing them to like this new material, I'm happy to do that. But I think sometimes that comes across probably the wrong way, where I really mean it as a genuine, oh, I'd love to be in there and do some things with the kids. That level of gatekeeping too, I think, can be problematic.
Yeah, because we feel watched, but that's another area where we have a disconnect to work out in our own field, that we complain about the parents who are not involved in the way we would like them to be. But then we also complain about the ones who want to stand around and talk a little longer in the morning, or want to spend some time in the classroom, just to be there and offer to help. We take both as sort of, they both sides will get our defenses up. we need to move past that. And if a parent wants to hang out in the classroom, even if you don't have a job for them to do, if it's not, you know, upsetting other children or interfering with the function of, really interfering, not just being inconvenient for you, but really interfering with the function of the day, then that's a great way to establish more of a partnership, is to let them share in what you're doing a little bit.
Yeah, and one of the things I would love to see too, and I feel like understaffing is really probably a common theme in a lot of my comments too, is that like I would like to talk to the teacher at the beginning and the end of the day, but I feel bad for doing it because I know they're still responsible for
they've
those
got 9 kids
in the
behind them.
yeah, and I don't want any fires to start because I want, you know, to talk to them for 2 or 3 minutes. So that's one area I wish that like drop off and pick off were a little bit different, structured in a different way, so that teachers would have that time to be able to communicate.
Yeah. But that early time of the day and late time of the day are when the center is the most short staffed, because they put just the minimum, because not all the kids are there yet, and so it's a systemic thing that we need to figure out how to make it work, because not everyone can come in for a private conference, or, you know, not all families can do those kinds of outside of the day things either. So it's a tricky thing to do. I'm going to ask you if you have any last things about partnership that you wanted to talk about that I didn't lead you to.
I think that's pretty much what I had on my notes of things I had thought about.
Okay. All right. That's really great. And the students and I are going to have good conversation about this. I think it's going to bring up a lot of good topics of discussion. But I have been asking all the families at the end of our interview if you can think of just one thing that it would be really important for someone who was going to take care of Lainey to know about her, or that would just really, you'd like to be able to share with someone.
I have more than one, but if I am forced to narrow it down, I would say that I feel like my goal with Lainey is to really raise a well-rounded human being, not to raise the one who achieves spelling her name before everyone else, or counting to 20 before everyone else. And those kind of milestones are fun to follow along with as a parent, but I don't put much stock in them. And as someone who was taught to like overachieve my entire life, I'm not interested in raising her in that type of way. I really want her to be a kind human being, to enjoy getting to go to school, to enjoy that social time around her friends, to enjoy building relationships with the teachers in her life. And that starts in early childhood.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I thank you again for joining us, Amanda, and for sharing with the students your voice and your perspective and your experiences, so that we can really sort of have a well-rounded exploration of partnership during this module. So thank you very much. And students will be figuring out what you're supposed to do with all of this here after you've watched it.